Welcome to the Joys of Binge Reading, the show for anyone who ever got to the end of a great book and wanted to read the next instalment. We interview successful series authors and recommend the best in mystery, suspense, historical and romance series, so you'll never be without a book you can't put down. You'll find this episode's show notes, a free ebook and lots more information at thejoysofbingereading.com. And now, here's our show.
Hi there, I'm your host Jenny Wheeler. Today I'm talking to Sophia James, a romance author who's had a very successful career with Harlequin historicals. She's got 24 books to her credit and more coming. But in the last few years she's turned her hand to writing Regency series as well as the standalones. Before we get to hear from Sophia though, just a quick reminder that the show notes for this episode are available at the website thejoysofbingereading.com. That's where you'll find links to Sophia's website and books, as well as a free ebook and information about how to subscribe to our podcast. But now, here's Sophia. Hello there, Sophia, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Jenny. It's lovely to be here.
Now, look, you've had an outstanding career as a romance writer, and I think you've said that you were first attracted to romance as a teen, reading Georgette Heyer on your grandma's porch. And I'm pretty confident maybe that was a purloined book from her bookshelf as well. But tell me, what was it encouraged you to take the next step and try your hand at writing romance, that once upon a time moment when you decided, I can do this?
Well, it was, as you say, I did love reading Georgette Heyer on my grandmother's porch with my twin sister. And then when I was about 23 or 24, I went to teach English in Spain, in Bilbao, which is on the north coast, the Vizcaya, the Basque area actually. And I was teaching English there in a little school. And I had two really sore wisdom teeth. And I'd gone along to the dentist, and the dentist said to me I had to have them out. So I got them out. And when I got home, one of the girls from the international school, there was a good international school there, which I'd have much rather been actually teaching at, and she came along with a book by Kathleen Woodowis, who I always loved, and that was Shanna, the book Shanna. And she also came along with a whole lot of, she knew I liked historicals, and she bought me a whole lot of Mills and Boon's historicals. And I was home from school for about 3 days, which was so lovely. And so I started reading them. And when I was reading them, I thought, why don't I write? I'd always written right from when I was really little, and I'd done a degree in English and history. And so then I thought, I'm going to try one. So I guess that was my moment. Yeah. And I did start virtually straight away. I used to come home from school at night and start writing. Yeah, that would be my moment.
Now, I hate to actually sort of date this, but was that on a computer or a typewriter or by hand?
Oh, I didn't have a computer then because, I was travelling a lot, and it would have been by hand. Yeah, I guess I always wrote by hand for a long time, really. It's only in the last few years that I've swapped over to a computer, really. I always found it was a good way of getting things down. And in fact, now I still write really often in bed. If I've gone up to bed and I'm reading or I think, I've got a good idea, I often put it into notebooks and then I transcribe over onto my computer. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so was it Georgette Heyer that made you think naturally of the Regency period, or what was it that attracted you to Regency?
Yes, it probably was actually, because I read all her books always. And you said I probably got probably got a book of my grandmother's, but I actually haven't, and I really regretted that because they all went to the Raglan Library, and I tried to get them later but never could, and they were sort of first edition burgundy covered leather sort of things, which were beautiful. So I sort of always loved the Regency, and I guess when you're reading a lot of Regency, by osmosis you pick up the conventions of that period. I like the manners of that period. I like the fact it seemed distant from this time. And there are just a whole lot of things in it that make a romance, really viable.
Yes, I think as a reader of Regency, I kind of gel with that you
Yes.
have got distinct conventions that you're usually working within. And when you break them, it's also interesting.
It is, and in fact, breaking the conventions is one of the things that I do. I do try to. I guess I don't write, that sort of comedy of manners or the real sort of man. I often am outside of society in my books. I've often got a chapter or two inside the society too, but often I'm not really. I'm often veering a little bit out of it. Yeah.
It amuses me to see some of the comment online, how picky people get about names, and a couple of your readers have got really irritated with names that you've chosen.
I know. And it's really interesting that because, when I first started, I guess I was a bit more, conventional and everything. But I always had it in my mind that I was going to write a trilogy, really. It was with 4 people called Asher, Taras, and Christo Wellingham, and they'd been in my mind for a long, long time. I think High Seas to High Society, which was Asher's story, was about the 3rd or 4th book I wrote, and so I'd always had these names in mind, and they were really people I knew inside of me, and those names were just names I used. I do now try a little bit more to look up the names of the period. I can understand why people, but it is a fantasy really, and I have to have a name that I gel with, or I find it really hard to write that character. I just can't use, although in my Men of Danger series I did use quite, Nathaniel, Lucas and Stephen, I think. So those were really just ordinary names, but yeah. Yeah, it's true. Emerald, Amethyst. Who's my new one? Oh, Celeste. I don't know. I have used strange names. And when people do criticise, and I have seen that, sometimes I take it aboard and sometimes I don't. I remember when I first started, someone criticised me for using exclamation marks. And she said, there's just so many exclamation marks in this book, it puts me off. Well, after that, I hardly used an exclamation mark because I went through and I thought, gosh, there are a lot. So I don't, sometimes I pick up criticism and other times I don't really. I have to write a book that I want to write and I need a name that I gel with.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that the Wellinghams were there quite early on in your career because, the series thing has become a big thing in the last few years. And I was going to ask you what had led you to write series, but obviously it has been there as a natural thing for you for a long time.
Well, Christo, Taras and Asher, they were sort of people I thought about right from the start when I wrote that 4th book or 3rd book, High Seas to High Society. But I didn't actually write the series for about 4 years later, I suppose. On about book 8 or 9 was One and a Shame Night, which is Taras' story, which has probably been my most successful book. And he's a blind hero. And I guess what happened is people kept writing to me and saying, where's Taras' story? Where's his? They mostly wanted his story. And then, of course, I whipped on and I did Lucinda's as well, which was the sister. And that was a really popular book as well, The Dissolute Duke. And so there were 4 of them in that series. Yes, I think series is something, if you can catch readers in a book on a series, they generally go back and get book, like that was book 2, Taras. They'd go back and do book 1, 3 and 4. So it was wonderful. And I would advise people to write series, actually. I write nearly everything in series now.
I think when people have invested time in a world or getting to know the characters, then they feel it pays off, they can go to another book. Yes, that's right.
Well, because you know that world, you've already invented that world. You know the house and you know the family. You know who they are, their personalities. You know what their history in some sense too, which throws you into another book with a lot of backstory. It's much easier. Yeah, I would definitely, writing from a backstory when you've had 3 others or 2 others or even 1, it definitely quickens up the process.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Taras, the blind hero,
yes.
And I think you also are known for having a lot of haunted or damaged heroes. Even in The Penniless Lords, each one of them carries a wound, whether it's seen or unseen. And I wondered if there was something about these quotes broken men that you found particularly interesting to write.
Yeah, probably is, because there's always a backstory that can, propel you into the book. I do like broken, damaged heroes, and I think my editor does too, Linda Fulju. She sort of encourages me to write damaged sort of heroes. In fact, I've just finished, mine was book 4 on a continuity called the Wicked Gentleman series. It's sort of I wrote it with Christine Merrill, Anne Lethbridge and Diane Gaston, and mine's the last book in that series, and that's just come out now, September, October, November, or August, September, October, November. My book's out in November. And it was interesting because in that series, I was given the broken hero. So, it is probably what I like to write. In fact, I can't think, have I ever written someone who wasn't really broken or damaged in a hero? I've started to swap that over into heroines. And my next book, and I don't know the title of it yet, it's coming out in early next year, is actually a really broken heroine. So that's been interesting. Yeah, it's just all that backstory. You can piggyback on it and start to put it in your story. Often when you write a very damaged hero, it's quite hard to have a really damaged heroine alongside them. So that sort of pulls you off into who the heroine is going to be and who the hero is going to be too. So you have a whole lot of stuff coming through into the book. It's great.
Is there something about historical fiction in general that you find appealing?
Well, I write in 2 periods, actually, although I wrote mostly in Regency. And I am a professional writer. I have to make some money, and it definitely is the one that you make the most money in, the Regency the Regency time. And I hate to say that, but you sort of, I am writing to live. This is my job, my full-time job now. But I really love medieval. I have written 3 books in medieval Scotland in around 1360. And I've loved that period too. The medieval period is really harsh. And in that, there's a freedom, because you can get your hero or heroine really to do virtually anything. I mean, in Regency it is a bit structured, and there are strictures. You can't do this, you can't do that. But I guess I love writing in the historical genre, because it feels different than this. It feels I've tried to write contemporary, and I actually have written one, but I never published that one. I just like the sense of history, I think. I have a history degree, and I've always loved history. And so that's just been something that I've just really been always interested in. Yeah.
Now, I do notice online you get quite a few foreign language reviews as well. So I guess that your books have found their way out of the English language into a lot of other languages.
Yes, they have. They have. I think the historicals generally they pick them up. And I think I'm published in lots of languages now. I don't know, maybe 20 different languages or maybe more. And you have places that you get a lot of fan mail from. Brazil seems fairly vocal. I get a lot of fan mail from there. But yeah, I do. Germany, Italy, France. Lots of interesting places. And in fact, in some of my books I can hardly work out where they're from. And my name isn't Sophia James, it's Sophia Jamesova or something. And I love it. I love getting the foreign copies. They come through the mail. I get 3 of them. And I get them quite often, really. Gosh, every few weeks, really, or a month or something. Probably less than a month, really. And so, yes, I do publish over there. And that's one of the lovely things about Harlequin Historical. If anyone's thinking about writing in Harlequin Historical, there is that they do widen up and translate your books, and you can get them translated to lots of languages, and that's quite, that's really lovely.
It's great that you don't have to do anything yourself to make it happen, isn't it?
And that's another thing why I really like Harlequin Historical. I've got an amazing editor. Linda Fulju is just lovely, and she's a sort of personal friend too, really, now. And I trust her and really like what she does. I would feel quite worried if I was just writing my book and then just trying to publish it myself, because I always get really good revisions, often 10 pages of, what about this, what about that? Maybe not structural revisions, but just about character or about continuity or about chronological sort of events. And I love getting those big revisions. I'd feel quite nervous to put a book out without them. So that's one really lovely thing about working for Harlequin Historical. I think it's been a good relationship for me.
It sounds like a safety net that would be quite nice to have.
It is. It really is. I mean, I'd probably have to go and get someone to look at the books, but I trust Linda, and I know what I like how I virtually do every single revision. I very seldom say, oh no, I don't really believe in that. I just do it because it's really lovely. I actually when I get my revisions back, they've been through 2 or 3 editors. I mean, Linda's my main editor, but there's always one who's like a super historical person and picks up things that we don't. And then there's always another person. So maybe 3 eyes have seen it, and they come back with 3 sets of revisions into my revisions. I really love that. Yeah, and it makes me feel better about a book. Sometimes I put books out and I think, that was a mistake, but not very often. I very seldom find big mistakes in my books, which is lovely.
That's great. Moving away from talking about specific books to a slightly wider look at your writing career, Sophia, if there is one thing that you have done in your writing career more than any other, what has it been that's been a secret to your success?
Well, I wrote by myself. I've been very isolated, I think, as a writer when I first started. And then in 1998, was it 1998? Must have been. The Clendon Award came out for Romance Writers of New Zealand, and I had heard about it, and I put my first book into that competition, and I won that competition, and then I joined Romance Writers of New Zealand, and I'd say, that was just such a lovely thing for me because all of a sudden, there was a whole lot of other people that that were my tribe. It's a funny thing, people say that, but it kind of is really. And I met lots of wonderful other writers, and I went to the conferences and I learnt and learnt and learnt. I would say if you're really serious about being a writer, you actually have to get the book out there, and it's a really scary thing to do. I remember when I went to it was the post office over at Titirangi, and I had to post it there before a certain day, and I wasn't, and then Pete, my husband, said, "Come on, we'll go over and have a cup of coffee, and you can over to Titirangi, and you can post it." And even putting it through the box, it felt like my baby, and were they going to tear it to bits, and and it was so important to me too. I really wanted to be a writer, and I suppose going into the competitions, joining the romance writers groups, if you're writing romance, that was huge for me.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that would. And I really think it's hard to do it all by yourself because, when you first start, things like point of view and deep point of view and just a lot of the rules of romance, rules in a way that you can be broken, but you have to learn them before you can break them, I think.
Sure. Turning now to thinking a little bit about the research that you've done over the years, and I think one of the things that people often like about historicals is the thought that they could go and see the places where these stories have taken part. And yes. I'm just wondering if there's certain places in London or even further afield in Europe, because I know the Penniless Lords get into Europe quite a bit. Anywhere that if you were going to organise a magical mystery literary tour for your books, that you'd trip-advise people to visit?
Yes. Ooh, gosh, what would I do? Well, lately I've been setting a lot more books in Paris. And Paris is a city I know very well, probably better than London, really. We've taken tours, art tours, really, and older New Zealander tours. We've sort of stopped now. We virtually do it ourselves now, me and Pete. But probably Paris, actually, and I'd show them my Paris. The Paris, I often, the one I've just written, Celeste is the heroine, and she's coming up through the Palais Royal and the back streets of the Palais Royal, up past the Bourse, and I know those areas so well because I always stay in the Tim Hotel, which is in the first arrondissement just behind Palais Royal, and I can imagine her walking with me in those steps. So I suppose it would be that magical mystery tour, really. It would be Paris, I think. Yeah.
Sure. And that Celeste book, what's the actual title of that one?
Look, I'm not sure. It's just gone in. It was Gosh, I can't even remember. It hasn't come out to me yet.
Okay, it's still new. Yes,
it's not going to be out until next year. I did send it in as Surrender to Love, but they didn't like that. So I think it might have been A Night of Surrender or something. I can't really remember. I can't think what that's called. Yeah.
Sure. You mentioned that you had done these art tours as part of your non-writing life, and I wondered if there were any particular favourite artists or artist places that might have sparked a writing inspiration sometime.
Oh, well, our trips were always very art related, but we actually mostly, we were in Paris, of course, at the d'Orsay and all the beautiful writers there. But we were mostly in the south of France, really. The Impressionist writers, Bonnard, Matisse, Cézanne, Picasso. He's not Impressionist, he's more. We sort of did our art tours mostly, and in Italy, really. We used to go to Italy too. No, not really. I don't know that. Well, actually, I've just written a book called, hang on, what's it called? I can't remember. Ruined by the Reckless Viscount. That just came out about a month or two ago, and the woman in there was actually an artist. And so I would say it's not really inspired, those books aren't really mostly inspired by pictures, but Pete was great then because he's an artist, my husband, and so every few minutes I'd go down and say, now, how would you do this? How would you do that? So that was inspired by, actual art. Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what Pete's professional name is? What?
Peter Featherston, but he's actually gone away from painting a bit at the moment, which is terrible because he needs to get back to it. He's been doing architecture and, trying to get our family through with 3 children and that, but they're all big now. So we're building a new little house on the front of our section, and then he's going to get back into art. So, and it's nice because having him as an artist and having me as a writer, it's so similar. The things that he does and I do, we're often talking and saying, I'm having a problem. He says, I have that same problem. So it's quite interrelated, really. All the creativity, all the aspects, all the parts of creativity are actually quite similar, I think. That's been quite interesting.
That sounds fabulous, yeah. Look, turning to Sophia as a reader, you've mentioned that you were a very keen reader when you were young. Have you had that feeling of wanting to binge read an author or a series? And if so, who is it that's attracted you?
I guess all through my life, one of the ones that has attracted me, I've had lots of them actually. When I first started, I used to read and everything of Georgette Heyer. Then I found Kathleen Woodiwiss, and she was a woman who I used to read a lot of her books. And I went on to Judith McNaught and who else did I go on to? Julie Garwood. But then I found Diana Gabaldon, who's of course her Jamie and Claire, which was such lovely characters. She's probably been the one in my life who I've always reread and read again because I love her characters. I love her sense of characters. She's so clever. I suppose it would be her really. And there's a show on TV at the moment called Outlander, and I'm really loving that.
Yeah, that's great. So at this stage in your career, if you were doing it all again, would you change anything about how you've gone about things?
Well, that's a good question. Would I change? I don't know. Probably not really. I've written books that I've liked myself. I've never put a book out that I thought I wish I hadn't written that. I take a long time to write too. I'm not really a fast writer. I only write 2 books a year. So once I wrote 3. But mostly, no, I don't think there's much I'd change. I think going into those competitions earlier on was really good. The Clendon and the Ruby, that was really good for me. I think now, perhaps from now on, I've written about 23 books or 22 books. Maybe it's 24. I don't know. I have to go and see what they are. I'm kind of looking at a change now, really. I'm looking, maybe I'll write another couple of books, but then I might veer off and do something completely mine.
Yes, that's interesting because that was going to be my next question was what was next for Sophia James and what were your current projects, really?
Well, my current project at the moment, I have my mum sick this year, and I've been looking after her. And she, passed away. So this has been quite a hard year for me in some ways. And actually, I'm struggling with the book I'm writing at the moment. I guess was really sad. But I'm thinking that I want to jump out of the historical, really, in some ways, on that period. And I'd quite like to write a book based in New Zealand.
That's great. And would it be contemporary as well, or
No, it wouldn't be. It isn't. It's the 1930s in Chelsea and in Birkenhead. So, and I'm sort of really been reading a lot of screenplay books and things at the moment. How to write a screenplay. It won't be a screenplay, I don't think. But I'm sort of really having a little bit of a sea change, really. And it's actually a book I started a long time ago. I've just got so much enmeshed, I guess, into the Harlequin historical, and having to write 2 books a year. And I've got a life outside writing. I haven't really done it, but I think probably in the next year or two, I will probably only, maybe even go back to 1 book a year with Harlequin historical and give myself a chance to try something different. Yeah.
And so obviously that wouldn't be one that would quite fit the Harlequin mould.
The Harlequin historical lines and guidelines are actually very specific. They are. It's a romance. It's you said about history and research and everything, and of course there is research, but most of it really is a romance set, in that time, and the romance is the most important part of a Harlequin historical, which is lovely too, and I actually personally like that. But the book I want to write next isn't like that, really. It's a romance as well, but it's only a little part, more romantic elements in a book around a historical time and a period and a historical event. I'd like to write that next.
Sounds fabulous.
Yeah. Well, I hope it will. And I'm sort of, I've got a contract. I'm still on contract with Harlequin historical, and I don't want to burn my bridges particularly. I'm still enjoying writing for them, and I really like Linda. But I can see other things in my future too, really.
Does that contract require a certain number of books a year?
It does, actually, but they're fairly generous with me. I really do think they would allow me, to try something else too.
Sure, yeah. Well, so far it's been great talking, and we are coming to the end of our time, but I'm wondering, how best can readers find you and your books? Do you have a website? Are you active on social media? Or
I'm not really terribly active on social media, actually. I have got a Facebook page, Sophia James, just on Facebook, and sophiajames.com on the website. And I try and keep that one up.
Uh-huh. Do you like to talk to your readers or interact with your readers?
I do. And I often get fan mail through Harlequin. I often get little letters and cards and things. It's really lovely. And I often get emails from readers and telling me, what's happening and when's the next one coming, and I liked this one. And I do get, I guess that's how I do it, really. You know what? My most important thing is really to write a good book.
Yeah, that is the key to it all, isn't it?
Really the key to it all. I mean, I've got friends who are on social media all the time, and I try not to be so much on social media because it really eats up your time, and I haven't got all that much. When I'm writing. I'm not really jumping onto Facebook or all the other ones. I get it on sometimes, but not that much.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to talk. It'll be quite a challenge to put these show notes together. I'll probably have to ask you by email for the spelling of some of those French names, but we'll get it together. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you for thinking of me for this, and it's been such fun. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Joys of Binge Reading podcast. You can find all the details and links for this episode at www.thejoysofbingereading.com. We'd love to hear your comments and suggestions for who you'd like us to interview next. And if you enjoyed the show, take a moment to subscribe on iTunes or a similar provider so you won't miss out on future guests. Thanks for joining us, and happy reading.